I have 0 friends, 0 talents, and 0 guys. So in other words, I'm a loser. This realization dawned on me when I was in middle school and met the love of my life, Daniel. From making him chocolate chip cookies to attempting to do a backflip, I did everything in my power in an attempt to make him mine. I even learned how to juggle in hopes of wowing Daniel, but hey, desperate times call for desperate measures. Granted, I probably didn't have to go to such extreme lengths just to prove to him that I was enough, but I wanted to show him that I was worthy. Over time, I came to the realization that I shouldn't have to change myself for someone else. Sadly, I'm not the only one guilty of doing so. Social media is notorious for deteriorating people's self-esteem by comparing them to celebrities who are being the epitome of beauty. And we've all heard stories about the olden days where men were to provide for the family while women were to stay home and take care of the kids. I fear that we've become too comfortable in allowing society to hold us to these unfair standards. We as a society place such an importance on these standards that people feel the need to comply with them. So today, let's understand the problems caused by society's high expectations. Next, we'll study the implications before finally exploring some solutions. After doing everything in my power to make Daniel mine, even learning how to break dance, it's safe to say that I gave up all hope that I would ever be good enough. But why did I feel the need to change myself for him? It's simple. I wanted to meet his standards. Women are constantly changing their appearance to meet the ideal standard of beauty, causing marketing companies to capitalize on their insecurities and drive them to purchase their products to supposedly fix all their problems. And while this may be beneficial in helping to attain the ideal image of perfection, is this helping the real problem? Women's lack of confidence due to having to look a certain way. Taylor Swift says in her documentary, Miss Americana, if you're thin enough, then you don't have that ass that everyone wants. But if you have enough weight on you to have an ass, then you're not thin enough. Similarly, women in certain career fields also struggle with not being taken seriously or feeling inferior to others. Women remain significantly underrepresented in the corporate world. According to Women in the Workplace, a study done in 2017, women are 18% less likely to be promoted than their male peers. But even men face issues such as these. Men feel as though they can't share their emotion due to the way society stigmatizes masculinity. And the idea that men have feelings is too often overlooked. In regards to mental health, the National Mental Health Alliance says that 51.2% of women receive help for their mental health, as opposed to 37.4% of males. Men feel as though it is inappropriate for them to share their emotion due to the way society places pressure on them. Society's issues create various issues, ranging from loss of self-esteem to fear of people being themselves, because too often we use these standards as an excuse to discriminate and stereotype against others. These problems can lead to severe repercussions, such as more easily allowing a gap between different groups of people. Instead of promoting equity, society promotes the idea that there is only one correct answer and one correct way to achieve it. Many unfair practices have become the norm in society, causing a lack of connection between different groups of people. For instance, disparities in wages have been a prominent issue for men, women, and minorities. Nina Rousseau, a postdoctoral associate at MIT, states that the residual pay gap, the pay gap that can be accounted for by gender differences in measured qualifications, has stagnated around 10% for the last 30 years. And if that isn't bad enough, women have been subjected to this inequality for such a long time that they negotiate less, receive lower salary, and therefore expect lower salary expectations. Societies has branched into every aspect of people's lives. Similarly, employers tend to undervalue minorities, causing them to receive less compensation than that of white men with those performances. Wilson states that white men are twice more likely to acquire a managerial job than black men, and 3 times more likely than black women. Rather than correlate people's salary based on work ethic, employers base it on gender and race. These aspects have taken over every aspect of people's lives. Not only are there physical implications, but there are mental ones as well. Take the Dahl test, for instance. The Dahl test is used to study the psychological effects of segregation on African American children. In this test, Drs. Clark used 4 dolls, all identical except for color, to test children's racial perception. The subjects, children ages 3 to 7, or has to identify the race of the doll and choose which doll they prefer. Unsurprisingly, the majority of them chose the white doll. This discrimination has been embedded in children's mind from such a young age, therefore causing African American children to feel inferior and damaging their self-esteem. Society's expectations have corrupted people's overall well-being. However, I've noticed this occur in my everyday life. Being the daughter of immigrant parents, I was fortunate enough to grow up with twice the culture, twice the languages, and twice the cuisine, my personal favorite. But with these advantages, there come disadvantages. Not only have I faced struggles regarding not being Indian enough, but also not being American enough. I was never truly embarrassed about my religion until I was in 2nd grade. My mom had packed me beansky sabji and roti, a common food eaten in our household. When I went to lunch that day, a student came up to me and said, "Ew, that's where that smell is coming from? How can you even eat that? It looks so gross." When I went home that day, I threw away my lunch and told my mom only to pack me American food from now on. On the opposite side of the spectrum, I would be ridiculed by people in India for not adhering to the Hindu religion. "Oh, you can't read and write Hindi? That makes sense. You grew up in the US, they would say to me. As a child, these comments were damaging to my self-identity. Nobody should have to judge themselves due to others' opinions, especially a young child. By constantly being held to these double standards, I felt as though I was locked in a battle between my Indian and American self, never truly able to find the balance, therefore losing myself to please the masses. And I know I joke about never finding love with Daniel, but the standards I held myself to were unjust. I was good enough being myself, and if he didn't realize that, then that was his loss. Rather than continue on with our harmful ways, let's take a step back and evaluate our decisions. And rather than discriminate, let's empathize. To do this, we need to understand that everyone faces the challenge of being held to unfair standards, and that our actions have severe consequences. By doing this, we come to the conclusion that society corrupts people's self-esteem, and that this leads to many implications in people's mental health. Dr. Riker, a scientist at the Center for Traumatic Stress, sees that 15% of the US population has problems rooting from society's immense pressure. Because of this, it is essential that we take initiative to find a solution. Instead of letting society discriminate against us, let's band together and make a change. Taking the time to acknowledge someone's problems can go a long way. I'm not saying that we shouldn't hold people accountable for their actions, but taking the time to understand their problems leads to substantial changes in the way society perceives others. If there's anything you take from my speech today, I hope it's that you remember to take a moment to listen to others instead of unfairly judging them. Thank you.